American Pickers. Frank Fritz friend reveals star's last days and unfulfilled dream. The American Pickers family and fans are still mourning the loss of Frank Fritz, who passed away on September 30 at age 60. His death came 2 years after suffering a debilitating stroke, which left him wheelchair-bound with the right side of his body paralyzed. In a heartbreaking revelation, Fritz's close friend Jerry Gendreau told the U.S. Sun that he would have returned to the show if it wasn't for his health issues. He was an active cast member of the hit History Channel series from 2010 to 2020 when he left to have back surgery and never returned after he was let go in 2021. During their time together on the show, Fritz and co-host Mike Wolfe traveled the country in search of antiques and artifacts that they could buy and flip for sale. Others, including Wolfe's brother Ravi and Danielle Colby, have become familiar faces on Pickers in recent years. There was somewhat of a falling out between Fritz and Wolfe for a bit, until the two buried the hatchet last year during a Memorial Day reunion. Fritz's pal Gendreau said, "I think Frank would have went back, but he had his health issues." And he did have some serious health issues. From 25 or 30 on, he suffered from Crohn's. The health issues Fritz faced continued to get worse, with 4 hospital trips in 2022 and 2023 for pneumonia and a seizure. Gendreau spoke about how bad it was for him, saying you would go to see him in the nursing home, and one half of his body was completely gone. He would lift his arm up, and it would just drop. He went as far as to say, "I think Frank could have lived a lot longer if the will to live would have been there." Tributes started to roll in after the news of Fritz's passing was announced. Wolfe posted a tribute on his Instagram. "I've known Frank for more than half my life, and what you've seen on TV has always been what I have seen. A dreamer who was just as sensitive as he was funny." He continued in the October 1 post that he was the same off-camera as he was on. Frank had a way of reaching the hearts of so many by just being himself. In a small, dimly lit corner of LeClaire, Iowa, Frank Fritz's memory lingers like the countless relics he collected over the years. For the millions of fans who religiously tuned in to watch American Pickers, Frank was more than just a television personality. He was a familiar face, a humble picker with a passion for history, and a man with a keen eye for forgotten treasures. But behind the scenes, beyond the antique-filled barns and dusty attics, there was another side of Frank that remained largely unseen, one filled with both triumph and heartache. A close friend of Frank, who had shared years of adventures and conversations, recently opened up about the final chapter of Frank's life, shedding light on the unfulfilled dream that haunted him until the end. The quiet end of a collector. For Frank Fritz, the years following his departure from American Pickers were a tumultuous journey. Health battles, personal struggles, and the weight of unachieved aspirations cast a shadow over his life. His friend, Mark Simmons, described Frank's last days as quiet yet heavy. As they sat together on Frank's front porch, sipping coffee and gazing at the rural landscape that Frank so cherished, it became clear that his time away from the spotlight wasn't the peaceful retirement many might have imagined. Frank had this way of masking his pain with humor, Mark recalled. He'd crack a joke about a rusty tractor or some old sign he'd found, but you could see the sadness in his eyes. He missed the hunt, the thrill of picking. It wasn't just about finding antiques. It was about connecting with people, hearing their stories, and preserving a piece of history. In those final months, Frank struggled to come to terms with the fact that he would never return to American Pickers. The rift between him and his longtime partner, Mike Wolfe, was one he never quite mended. He felt like he was forgotten, discarded even, Mark said softly. It hurt him more than people realized. The unfulfilled dream. Despite the fame and fortune that came with American Pickers, Frank harbored a dream that had nothing to do with television. His greatest ambition was to open a museum, a place where the artifacts he'd spent his life collecting could be displayed for the world to appreciate. It was an idea born long before Pickers had catapulted him into the national spotlight, and it had always lingered in the back of his mind, a beacon of purpose. He used to talk about it all the time, Mark said. He didn't just want to show off old stuff. He wanted to tell the stories behind them. Each piece had a history, a soul, and Frank wanted people to feel that connection. Frank envisioned a space filled with Americana, gas station signs, antique motorcycles, vintage toys, and the oddball items he loved so much. It would be a place where visitors could walk through time, seeing firsthand the things that had shaped America's past. He imagined it as more than just a museum. It would be an experience, a chance to live the stories he had collected along with the artifacts. But as Frank's health began to deteriorate, that dream slowly slipped away. The energy required to launch such a project was beyond his reach, and without the backing of his former television network or business partners, it became clear that the museum would never come to fruition. He'd still talk about it, even in the end, Mark shared. He'd say, "One day we'll get that museum up and running," but we both knew it wasn't going to happen. Struggles behind the smile, though Frank remained hopeful for much of his life. His departure from American Pickers marked the beginning of a downward spiral. Friends close to him noticed the toll that the show's exit took on his spirit. His jovial, easygoing nature was replaced with a more introspective, withdrawn demeanor. Frank was a man who had lived his life on the road, constantly moving, always searching for the next big find. Without the show, he seemed lost, stuck in a world that no longer made sense. He felt betrayed, Mark said bluntly. Frank gave his heart to that show. It wasn't just a job for him, it was his life. And when it all ended, he didn't know how to fill that void. In addition to the emotional strain, Frank's physical health worsened. He suffered from a debilitating back injury that required surgery, and his recovery was slow and painful. The injury, combined with his ongoing battle with Crohn's disease, left Frank weakened and unable to pick the way he once had. The long days on the road, rummaging through barns and garages, were behind him, and it was a reality he struggled to accept. He'd tell me about all these places he still wanted to go, all the pics he never got to finish, Mark said. But he couldn't do it anymore, and that was the hardest part for him. A legacy left behind. Despite the hardships, Frank Fritz's legacy as one of America's most beloved pickers remains intact. Fans continue to celebrate his contributions to the world of antiques, and many have taken to social media to share their favorite moments from American pickers. Frank's ability to connect with people, to uncover the hidden gems in the most unlikely places, made him a star in his own right. As Mark Simmons sat beside Frank in those final days, he couldn't help but think about the life his friend had lived. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't without its challenges, but Frank had managed to carve out a place in the hearts of millions. He was a good man, Mark said, his voice filled with emotion. He wasn't flashy or looking for fame. He just loved what he did, and he loved sharing it with people. That's how I'll always remember him. Just Frank, the guy who could turn a pile of rust into something beautiful. Frank Fritz may have left this world with an unfulfilled dream, but he also left behind a legacy of passion, kindness, and the timeless treasures he spent his life collecting. His memory, much like the artifacts he loved so much, will continue to live on, cherished by those who knew him, and by the countless fans who admired his work.